All right, Jack, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
I really honor your time and your expertise and your wisdom, and that's why I wanted to sit down with you about this. And one of the things about the flow state that I'm so passionate about is I really feel it can transform humanity in terms of mental health. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear your input on your feeling about the relationship between flow state and mental health and how that translates.
Well, for me, when I'm in what you were calling the flow state, is I'm 100% present. When we talk about mindfulness, it's like I'm aware of me, I'm aware of my body, I'm aware of you, I'm aware of the context. It's just like everything's present. And I have an experience of some deeper part of me and its wisdom, its knowledge, its awareness. And if you believe as I do, that we are tapped into all knowledge through the universal mind, if you will, that then if you to go to your question about mental health and mental illness and so forth, that if you're in touch with that part of you, you're not in touch with your inner critic, your ego, your memories of trauma and all that. You're present, you're here in the moment. Yeah. And then it's just whatever shows up. The problem is most of us have so many fears, so many limiting beliefs, so many concerns. We're managing our interaction. Like, I'm afraid if I say this, you might not like me. Or you remind me of my aunt who was mean to me, so all of a sudden I'm not here with you as you. And then we get all these distortions that show up in our consciousness and in our relationships and our communication. And so we know, I think from a lot of research and in my own experience, that when I can get a person, whether it's me or someone else, into that place of connectedness, I teach seminars on success. That's mainly what I'm known for, other than the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And when I do my longer workshops, like Breakthrough to Success and our Train program, we do meditations every morning. I lead people through meditations. And there's one that's quite long. It's a Tree of Life meditation, which comes from the Kabbalah tradition. And people will tell me at the end of the seminar, I came because I wanted to be more successful. I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to have more money. I wanted to be a best-selling author. But the best parts of the seminar were the meditations, and I had these insights and epiphanies, and I felt inner peace for the first time and so forth. And when you're in that state, then you know the right thing to say. Mm-hmm. And I'll share an experience of my own life where I was working with a guy, a beautiful guy, Antoine Chevalier, who's a shaman, who is also an MD, and he was working with me on this issue I have of feeling overly concerned about being of value to people and wanting to know. And if you were to go into my office, I have read 3,000 books, most of which I still have, and there are many times when they're piled up as high as these chairs are, and he just said, I want to close your eyes, and I'm going to snap my finger, and you're going to be in a past life that will give information about this. So I snapped his finger, and all of a sudden, I'm a doctor in the 1890s, 1910s, somewhere in that time in Europe. And this woman has some disease, and I can't figure out what it is, and I can't help her. And I am distraught. And I literally I made a commitment in that lifetime. I am never going to be in a situation where I don't know again. I'm going to read every book, study every system. Wow. And I got so many certifications, it's ridiculous, And so, and then he said to me, was there another decision you could have made? And he paused for a long time. He was going to let me come up with it. And all of a sudden I went, wow, if I totally trusted in my intuition and the fact that there is a universal intelligence and I can access that, being in the flow state, I wouldn't need to read all those books because I would just intuitively know the right thing to say or do. And that was like an epiphany that just freed me up. I mean, I still read, but not with the same sense of desperation to know. And the problem with reading and knowing so much is it does pay off, but you're getting the benefit of something that's actually somewhat neurotic. and it's keeping, I spent a lot of time reading books when I probably would have been better off interacting with people, being in nature, whatever, being on retreat, meditating more perhaps. And so I know that when you're in that state, then you are mentally healthy because you're not being controlled by your emotional traumas, your fears, your concerns, your image protection, all of that. You're just in the moment with the highest order of consciousness coming through you as you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love
Okay.
how you said that. That's
Good.
perfect. And just in terms of how do you think people can get into that? Because there's many, I guess, pathways in, but for yourself, do you have a daily practice or something? You mentioned meditation, but do you have things that you do if you find yourself a little out of it to get into that flow state?
I do. It's true. I would like to say I meditate every day. That'd be a lie. I meditate most days. But sometimes if I have to get up and catch a plane at 6:30 in the morning, it means getting up at 4. I don't. And then I probably think, well, on the plane I could, but I don't. I fall asleep on the plane, whatever. But that is a practice I do. And that the more I do that, then it just kind of happens throughout the day. I have a meditation teacher who's a friend, or a friend who's a meditation teacher, who I asked him once, I said, how many hours a day do you meditate? He said, I'm not ever not meditating.
Exactly.
And he had been in a Buddhist retreat monastery for 12 years, meditating anywhere from 12 to 14 hours a day. So it's just how he is right now. And for me, I'm often that way. I'm often just present. But if I'm finding myself out of sync, what I will do is meditate. Like if I'm writing a book, usually it's just flowing through me. But if I get into what most people would call writer's block, I start thinking about, well, how will this read in Iowa? Will this be, will this guy think it's intellectual enough and respect me as a self-esteem expert or whatever? Then I start to get blocked. And so I will literally close my eyes and meditate. And then I'll ask God, a higher power, source energy, however you want to hold that, universal mind, what do I need to be saying right now? And then it starts flowing again. And when I'm running seminars, sometimes I'm in my head. I'm thinking about, well, we got lunch coming up and how much time do we have and all that. But if I'm here with you and really present, I'll do things like you'll start to talk and I'll interrupt you and say, what happened to you when you were 4? And I go, where the hell did that come from? And we'll say, that's when my dad left, whatever. Yeah. So there's a knowingness that comes from just being present. As I look into your eyes, if I were to fully do that right now, we would drop into that state. I don't know if it would make for a good interview or not. It might. But I wouldn't be so much worried about, am I answering the questions right? Is this valuable? Am I answering, is this giving her what she needs? Is this going to be useful for the people? I'm just present.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just being present.
I agree, 100%. And so in terms of people, because you work with a lot of people, and obviously most of the time when people are coming to learn how to be successful or the different principles that you're teaching, I feel that there is an element of what they're really seeking is how to get into this state. Because if you could access infinite intelligence with this state, you don't really need anything else, right? You don't really need to know the formula of success if you got that, right? So when you're teaching, is there a way that you communicate that so that people could really truly tap into that without thinking, oh, I need to do 10 more certifications and but really to get into that space so they can access this infinite intelligence that's available to you and to everybody.
Right. As I said, I teach a lot of different kinds of meditations. And when I sit down and meditate, I don't really know which one I'm going to do that morning. And it just kind of comes to me, we'll do this one. Or I'll start to do like a mantra or something, and it just feels off. I think, well, maybe I'll do a different mantra, different repetition of phrase, like Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Namah Shivaya, or whatever. And then if I get on it, it feels right. And then sometimes that doesn't feel like the way to go. And then I'll do, well, let's do Vipassana, where I'm just observing my breath and whatever sensations come into mind. And so I teach each morning, I teach a different form of that. And the other thing I do, because I want people to be in that space as we're moving through the day. And the other thing, I believe that your goals, which I believe in goals, and I think goals are valuable. Yeah. And that the goals, though, should be aligned with your purpose. So a lot of people are setting goals based on their ego needs. I want to be famous. I want to make a lot of money. I want to be a bestseller. I want to be the CEO of the company, have a big house, whatever. But if your goals are aligned with your true essential purpose, what are you here to manifest, to bring through, to contribute to society, whatever it might be, that then those goals, to use a phrase that I love from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book, Steve Covey said, you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. And so you can get all that stuff and you're still not happy. And we all know multimillionaires who are not happy. Yeah. You know, so basically I do a heart math exercise called the quick coherence process, where you breathe into your heart. So you're breathing through your nose, but you're imagining that the air is coming in through your chest into your heart. And with each breath, it's expanding and getting larger and larger. And then you begin to think of something you really appreciate, some person, place, or thing. And then each breath is expanding the quality of appreciation. And after doing that for just a few minutes, literally, what happens is people are in a space of that flow state. So now when I ask them, what is your purpose? It comes from that higher place. And then all of a sudden people think, oh my God, I want to write books for kids, or I want to have a retreat center for orphans or homeless animals or whatever. They never would have thought about that when they came in. And it can be that becomes your career, or it could become an avocation, or it could become the philanthropic thing you do while you're still being a lawyer or whatever. But now their goals are related to that. And as we do that throughout the seminar, people are starting to see, I want to go into that place before I make decisions, before I interact with people. So I would say that's as much as I do about that. I probably, as we've talked about the flow state and I learn more about it as a concept, maybe I'll put more attention on naming it that and the value of being in that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, you know, when I spoke at the United Nations, that was one of the interesting things. The guy that invited me, he's a coherence, I guess it's like a resonance expert from Italy, and he did this meditation with me. It was all thank you. So it was 21 minutes of thank you repeated out loud, and that supposedly puts you into this resonant coherence with I think flow state, but it's love, appreciation.
Well, there's a guy in Japan, I think he was the richest man in Japan, and when he was interviewed, why are you so successful? He says, because I am constantly repeating arigato all day long, which is thank you in Japanese.
Oh, beautiful.
And, you know, everything in The Secret, the movie, the book, everyone that's into this work talks about gratitude precedes manifestation. Yeah. You know, you have to start from a place of appreciation and gratitude. And if you're just chanting thank you all day long or for 21 minutes or whatever, and focusing on what you're grateful for, doing gratitude exercises. And I'll often start the day with that, you know, like sit with someone, you're my partner, and I say, what are you grateful for? And you tell me. I ask you again, what are you grateful for? And we just do that over and over for several minutes, then you do that for me. What happens is we're doing two things. We're connecting around gratitude, eye contact the whole time. The eyes are the windows of the soul, and that creates a space that now we can manifest through and from.
So you do that with like business partners, you mean, when you say partner?
Well, no, if I'm running a workshop, let's say for 400 people, I'll get everyone to take a chair, find a partner, sit knee to knee, eye to eye, keep the eye contact going, and then do the repeating question.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I believe, so you're familiar, I'm sure, with the like emotional tone scale, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting. Gratitude is up there with love, gratitude, appreciation, joy, and all the higher vibrations. Right. I feel that flow state is only available for people in the higher vibrations. Like, I think it's love or above is what there is a woman.
I like that phrase. Love or above.
Love or above, flow state. Right. And then everything below that, right? Fear and, you know, complaining, like all these energies.
Jealousy.
That's what blocks the flow, right? Yeah. So that's why I think it's a mental health issue, right? So if you can get rid of these negative thinking and then just focus on these positive thoughts, that could be the beginning. But it's also the feeling of that. And in your meditations that you teach, what do you think about that in terms of connecting the thought, which is in the mind, with the feeling of something? Because I think a lot of people have a disconnection there, like they're thinking what they want or positive, but it's not manifesting inside of them, perhaps. And so it's not translating.
The way I teach this is once you have your purpose, and now you have a vision of your ideal life that would fulfill that purpose and support that purpose. Now we turn that into specific goals. And then we have an affirmation for each goal. And as you repeat the affirmation and you visualize it as completed in your head, then what would the feelings be if you already had that? So you'd be feeling grateful, you'd be feeling peace, you'd be feeling relief, you'd be feeling happiness, you'd be feeling joy, you'd be feeling love. And so I teach people just like an actor, what I want you to do is when you're visualizing happiness, imagine the feelings you'd be having. You've got the new car, you're speaking to 1,000 people, your book's being published, you're teaching in a school in Africa, you're whatever. And then what would you be feeling? And I want you as an actor to create that feeling inside. So I imagine, it can be as simple as imagine the thrill of pushing on the accelerator of your new car, or it could be the thrill of being appreciated by the kids in the school in Africa you just built. Yeah. What would you feel? Yeah. And so that brings in the feeling. I say the goal is the steering wheel of your car. The affirmation is the GPS direction of where you want to go. And the emotion is the fuel. If your car has no fuel in it, whether it's solar electric or whether it's gas or whatever, without the fuel it doesn't go anywhere. And the emotion is what hypercharges and fuels the movement forward.
Absolutely, 100%. I've been working with a doctor from Harvard for about 5 years, Dr. Satbir Khalsa. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his work, but it's interesting because they've done over 20 years of research to show the science side of this. Because I think that it's interesting when we talk about it and people that are living it, it's like obvious, right? And then some people really need to know, like the logical brain wants to see science. So it's fascinating. And what they've shown is like MRI brain scans of people who get into these states and then how it actually starts to awaken the lobes of the brain and the gray matter and also kind of rewiring neural synapses to just have a whole new perspective on life. So do you have any kind of statistics or research or anything that you've followed that's inspired you into this direction for your life?
When I was in graduate school, we had a professor come from a university in California. I was at University of Massachusetts, and he was into something called psychosynthesis, which is of spiritualized psychology. There was a guy who was a contemporary of Carl Jung who was studying Tibetan knowledge, and he started applying that in his psychiatry. He was a psychiatrist. And anyway, a lot of guided visualization work. And so this guy started taking us through some guided visualizations. And here I am, I'm probably 27 at the time. And he said, I want you to go back to when you decided to become a teacher. And most people, when they reported out at the end of that, was like, oh, it was third grade, Mrs. Tuttle, and she really inspired me. Or it was during the civil rights movement, and I realized we need to educate black kids in the South, and whatever it was. And I went back to before I was born, which I was not expecting to do that. And all of a sudden, I'm flying through space with a bunch of other irreverent but very highly conscious people. And most of my friends, like Michael Beckwith and so forth, they're all really spiritually evolved, but they're irreverent. They can tell you a dirty joke,
Right.
And they laugh about things, and they don't take things too seriously and all that. And so I had all these people, and we're literally like in a mystery school with another level of consciousness, and I'm looking down on Earth, and I go, oh my God, this is World War II was going on. I was born in 1944. And we're dropping bombs everywhere and people are dying. And I'm going, it's like driving past an accident on a freeway. You'd stop, you'd help, And I said, I'm going down there and help out. And they're going, come on, you're being codependent. Let them, it's their responsibility. It's their lives, let them work it out. And I said, no, I'm going down to help. So I incarnated, got born, and didn't know that when I was a kid. But here I'm having this awareness, and I'm going, whoa. And then I would meet people like yourself or others, and I'd say, wow, we were part of this, I called it the Golden Motorcycle Gang, because we were all like kind of Harley Davis guys, but we were conscious. And so I kind of, at that moment in time, realized why I was here. And that's when I started studying meditation and all of this stuff, and I really wanted to be a contributor, to do my work, which was to bring peace and consciousness and love and so forth to the world. So that was the decision. That's how it came to be. And then through all the practices of like a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreats and things like that, I got into what we're calling the flow state here, being just, present and conscious and trusting inner guidance and so on and so forth.
Wow, beautiful. I did Vipassana too. It's life-changing. So beautiful. It's interesting. There was recently somebody mentioned to me, and I think it makes a lot of sense, that the new Buddha is the Buddha Maitreya, which is the laughing Buddha. Like there was the sovereign, the one from Vipassana, which is very powerful and important. Right. And then the evolution of that is that it's kind of all just a cosmic joke a little bit. So it's like you don't have to take things too seriously.
Exactly.
But I think you have to go through the silence to get to that place.
I think so. Because there's a lot of humor in the world, but people are taking things so seriously and so upset about things, To go back to your original question, which I didn't really answer, which is about the science of it. I'm fascinated by the science of it because, I've read a lot of books on quantum physics and neuropsychology and so on and so forth. What I love about it is it keeps validating things I intuitively knew. I got to the point where I was going to write a doctoral dissertation. I was in graduate school, and I did all the work except the dissertation. And I got to the place where I went I don't need to prove this to myself anymore. I don't need to be putting more data together to prove it because I just knew it intuitively. But then when all these books came out on quantum physics and on neuroscience and all of that, I just went, oh, of course, One of my friends wrote a book called The Mystic, I think it was The Mystic, the Shaman, and the Physicist, and that they all are talking about the exact same thing. I was in a workshop recently where we had some pretty fundamentalist Christians and some very New Age people, and I realized as they were both talking, they're talking about the exact same thing. The Lord put it in my heart. Well, as opposed to I'm following inner guidance. I tuned into my consciousness of what's wanting to evolve through me. It's all the same. It's just different languaging. And when you really see that, there's only so much truth in the world. Yeah. And anyway, I love the science of it. It makes it easier to teach it because I got engineers and lawyers and people who love to argue about things. And exactly. It speaks to their left side of their brain and it allows them to surrender and actually open their hearts.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because when Dr. Khalsa went to the parliament in England, and he spoke about his research, and then the next year they made a law, 370 schools started making a requirement to have meditation and mindfulness in the schools. Beautiful. So I really feel like these types of things, it's interesting, I feel that both sides have to be present. So the movie, right, and the work that we do in the books, this is also essential because most people actually are influenced by media, and whether it's through a movie or a book or through a teaching or through a celebrity doing something, then they're like, oh, this is what I should be doing. And then the other side, the research is the backing it just the foundation that makes it valid, I guess.
Well, we have two sides of our brain.
Yeah.
One's more logical, linear, and the other's more creative and gestalt and holistic and intuitive and feeling and all that. And there's a purpose for that. Now, this is totally off the topic, but I was in Hawaii for a month just recently, and we were out there on a boat over near Lanai, and there must have been 300 spinner dolphins. I mean, it was like CGI, there can't be that many dolphins, really. Yeah. And they're all jumping around the boat. And this guy was saying about dolphins that they have to keep swimming in order to get the water to go through their gills to get the oxygen, but they also have to sleep. So how do you do that? When I was snorkeling, I'd see fish sleeping on the bottom of the ocean, that don't need to do that. And they turn off one half of their brain. And then the other half is operating while they're swimming. And then they turn that side on and this side off, and they can keep doing that. So therefore, they're getting the rest they need for the brain to regenerate and integrate and all of that stuff. I thought it was really cool. But the point being that there's a reason for logic. We can plan a vacation and all that. But I think we need to honor both sides of the brain.
Absolutely. So that's the intention of this film, is to be able to present it from all the different sides so that people, maybe one side will resonate. Some people think differently, right?
Sure.
So the perspective is, I think, what could help the most amount of people. I feel that one of the things I see in humanity, and you can tell me your opinion, but is a lot of people are suffering, honestly. And, you look at 7.5 billion people. We even have this climate crisis. We have so many things. One of the things that can really shift that is a mass awakening. Right? Consciousness. And the awakening towards not only positive thinking, but also how can I serve? As I do feel from my own path anyway, that's one of the keys to not only living in the flow state, but really being a part of the oneness of existence, right? It's I'm here also to serve, like you said, that's what you knew you incarnated for that reason. So just from your perspective, how do you feel that, let's say, being of service, whether it's volunteering or that your work is aligned with contribution, that affects somebody's success, their happiness, and maybe even a story from your own experience or somebody that you know?
I think being of service, making a difference, mattering. People want to matter.
Yeah.
People want to know that somehow that their existence makes a difference, contributes, whether it's being a mom or being a traffic cop and people aren't getting killed because you're directing the traffic, or you're cooking really good food so that people can eat and be healthy.
Yeah.
A lot of times people think, oh, be of service, I've got to start an ashram or save all the children in Africa, or, feed everyone in New York, and it's overwhelming and people go, ugh. But my sister, for example, she was the person in the neighborhood, all the kids came to her house. She was like the mom for all the teenagers,
Yeah.
and she was of huge service, and later she wrote Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, a bunch of books, which took that even out further. But the point being that it's a natural part of ourselves. We need to do that, and I think that what happens is that the way I hold it is there are 7 areas of life. You've got your job and career, you've got finances, you've got your health and fitness, you have relationships, you have, things you want to do just because you want to do them, which I call personal. And then we've got contribution. We all want to contribute. Yeah. And whether it's just mentoring the kid down the block or teaching some kid in the neighborhood how to fix a car because they keep hanging out at your garage, that's fulfilling. And we did a book called Chicken Soup for the Volunteer Soul. And every story would say, I got more out of it for me than I ever thought that I ever gave to the people I was serving, because there's a contribution. I tell a story about a man I met at a conference. We were all receiving awards for being outstanding Americans. And he had started a foundation, but he gave a little speech. We all got to give like an 18-minute TED Talk type speech. And he said that his life went through 4 stages. First stage was stuff. He thought if he had all the right stuff, he would be happy. He had the right car and the right wife and the right house and belonged to the right clubs. And then he said he wasn't happy. So then the second stage, he called it different stuff. Better stuff. So he said, I got a better plane, a better boat. He was worth $600 million. and a better house and more exotic cars and all this stuff. He said, still wasn't happy. And he said, well, maybe I'm getting the wrong stuff. So then he said, that's when he bought the Seattle Seahawks football team. He thought if he had that, he'd be really happy. And he was sitting in the owner's box. It still wasn't happy. And then one day, a friend of his said, I'm going to Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I'm going to drop off 40 wheelchairs for kids who are lost their legs in landmines and maybe congenitally born that way. Would you like to come? And this was a good friend. He said, sure. So they got on the plane. They took these 40 wheelchairs. They landed on the tarmac. And these kids are all lined up, and they're putting kids in wheelchairs. And he's, it's nice. And finally, he picks up this one boy, and he puts him in a wheelchair. And the little kid grabs his hand, and through an interpreter, in tears, he says, please don't go yet. I want to memorize your face. So when we meet again in heaven, I can thank you one more time. And he said, it was the first time in my life I felt pure joy.
Wow.
And he came home, and he started the Ken Behring Wheelchair Foundation. And he's given away something like 40,000 wheelchairs around the world. And now he's building wells, because when he was in Africa, he realized the wheelchairs aren't that helpful if you're dying because the water's all infected or there's a drought or whatever. Yeah. But I think we all want to experience that experience of serving, Yeah. Even kids in gangs who are teaching other kids how to be gang members, they're feeling good because they're doing what they think is good. Yeah. And they're helping these kids not be hurt by the rival gangs, and so forth, because there's this need to feel like I make a difference.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it was also the same thing for me. And for instance, when I started teaching in Bali, we went into an orphanage. There was this orphanage, all the children were deaf and mute, and we just played with them. They were the most joyous children. We were like, these people are happier than anyone I know back home, and they got nothing. They had like 40 kids, one room, nothing. And we had a lot of fun with them, and it helped the students I brought. It helped them so much more, even than my whole training. I mean, the training was life-changing, but they were like, at the end, that was my favorite part, and it changed them so much on a deep level, because they were like, wow, these people have nothing, and they're happy, and I complain about my little things, and it just gives you this perspective of life.
We were in Africa. My brother-in-law was an ambassador in Cameroon, and so it took all of my kids, went to Cameroon. We were there 12 days. We traveled around all these districts in Cameroon. And I don't know, about halfway through it, my son, who was probably about 13 or 14 at the time, wrote a song called Diamonds in the Dust. And he said, because everything's really dusty, sub-Saharan Africa, right under is all dusty because the global warming's drying up more desert and it all blows south. And he said, but they're so happy. He said, I get upset when there's a stain on my T-shirt. They don't even have T-shirts, you know.
Right.
And so he wrote this beautiful, beautiful song, but he came back to America and he realized so many of his things that he wanted were so superficial, and that you didn't have to have all those things to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, you could just choose to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I was just reading Oprah's book, and it's called The Path Made Clear, and you're in it a lot. And it's funny because I was talking to you about it. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
But anyway, when I say a lot, like you're quoted a few times, which
Right,
is a lot
right.
because most people only once, if that. So anyway, and it kept going back to this flow, actually. It was talking about being in flow made the path clear, right?
Yes.
So it was like the most beautiful aha for me to see, like, yeah, I really feel everybody's getting this at this point. It's like being in flow, path is clear, guidance is inside, and happiness is within. And these are like basic universal principles.
Well, one of my friends, Dr. Michael Beckwith, is he was the black guy in The Secret. That's the easiest way to
I know
identify
him.
him for
I
most
know
people.
him.
And he says there's 4 stages of spiritual development. Number 1, you're a victim. Why are you doing this to me? Number 2, you realize that, he calls it the manipulative state. You realize there's rules. And if you follow those rules, like affirmations, visualization, gratitude, etc., things work. But you're still manipulating everything, usually out of your ego needs. And then all of a sudden you realize if there's rules, there has to be a rule maker. So now you go, well, I'm going to surrender to thy will, not my will, which means you open up to inner guidance and you do what follows. You know, he calls it as expressing divine will and evolution through you as you.
Right.
And then the last stage is you realize you are it. You're not separate from God. You're one with God. You're not all of God. You're like one molecule of water in the ocean, but you're still ocean.
Yeah.
You know? And then life gets really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's what being in a flow state really is.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. I love that. Yeah, thank you. You know, there's actually a book, I think it's by Sri Nisarga De Maharaj, and it's like, you are that. You know
I've read that book. It's a great book.
So good. I guess it's exactly the same message.
Yeah.
And I feel that is the interesting thing about religion and all the spirituality is that, like you said a minute ago, it's like they all come back to the same exact message.
Yeah.
And it's just different ways of saying it. And that's one of the reasons for this movie to have so many different people talking about it, because it's like, okay, so Jesus was saying, you know, love thy brother as yourself. And, you know, Buddha was saying kind of the same exact thing, you know? So then it's like, all right, you start to see the pattern and you realize, all right, there's a universal truth here, and once you tap into that, it's a language of itself.
Yeah.
Beyond
and I
words.
think what we're seeing is we all use a lot of different words,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing, and we're starting to see that, and that's really what this level of transformation we're at the moment is.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
And the flow state, like that's why I like the words. It's so simple.
Well, because it's not anything that anyone can relate back to and say, well, it's not Christianity, it's not this, it's not that, and have all these preconceptions and prejudgments about. So it makes it easy to talk about.
Absolutely. And I'm sure because you have such an extensive background, you studied Taoism a little bit,
A
right?
little bit.
So,
Feng.
yeah, so the Tao, right? The Tao is flow, right? So that's one of the things I think is very interesting, because Taoism is not a religion. It's just a philosophy.
Right.
But the idea is that Tao is flow, and it's, I guess you could also say oneness. There's different words that people are using to like this energy, or however you want to say. So it's fascinating because when like even Bruce Lee, he was like, be like water. And it's many different ways to describe how do you do this, right?
Right?
Can you think of a way to say that, this be like water, or be the flow?
Well, first of all, stop resisting what is.
Okay.
Because water just goes around, doesn't resist the rock, it just goes around the rock.
Exactly.
You know? And I would say just allow yourself to be with what is, including your own inclinations. You know, when you're in that state of flow, what is it you want to do? Trust your heart, follow your joy, you know, because your joy is your internal guidance system, that you're on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your beautiful contribution, and I'm
My
looking
pleasure.
forward to sharing your wisdom with the world.
Thank you.
One of the things I think that we're all here for is to leave a legacy, and I think you've already done that, but there's a lot left for you to do, and I'm grateful for your time today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to your students.
Thank you. Namaste.